Let's go back to 2016, because as we already know, 4 years ago today, I turned 30. 30 was a big year for me. After what some may call a successful career in investment banking, I resigned. I had big plans. Go off, build that app, create that unicorn. Because in 2016, that's what everybody did. But I couldn't just leave. I had to serve out this resignation period. And that resignation period was the perfect time for me to go and get my annual health physical. The annual health physical was something that I'd done since well before the age of 18. And probably some of you are asking, why would anybody do such a thing? Well, I was an athlete. I still am. And I put a high value at performing at my best, both physically and mentally. That annual physical was a way for me to check up and make sure all of the internal machinery was running according to plan. And so in the years leading up to my 30th, the doctor and I would sit down and really discuss what tests to order. Each year I would push him to order more and more tests. And so now I'm retired at the rightful age of 30, and I go in for another physical. I remember walking into the doctor's office. I sat down in those really comfy leather chairs that they have, which I'm convinced that they're comfy because you're going to be waiting a while. And I eventually get called back. By the look on his face, I could tell he didn't have a chance to review my labs before we met. Everyone here is working on something, and that something was about ready to become crystal clear to me. We went through my labs one by one in real time. Cholesterol, good. Liver function, good. Cardiac CT scan for calcium. Dude, you have calcium. A cardiac CT scan for calcium is an x-ray of your heart's arteries, looking for the narrowing of those arteries by calcium-containing plaque. You know those moments when somebody tells you life-changing news that's unexpected? What happens to you? Your heart starts to beat really fast, right? Actually, that probably doesn't do it justice. My heart was beating through my chest. It's a little bit like preparing for a TEDx talk. But what went wrong? I wasn't fat. I didn't smoke. I felt pretty freaking great. At that time, I did drink a little bit much, but pretty freaking great is in the eyes of the beholder. A series of tests over the next couple of weeks confirmed what we already knew with that cardiac CT scan. I had accelerated signs of aging, which led to cardiovascular disease. Cardiovascular disease is the leading preventable cause of death around the world. But what went wrong? All right, so at this point, I need to admit to you guys that my life at this point was pretty crazy. I was flying all over the world, 40 different countries in 4 years. There was rarely a week where I was in the same time zone. And from the age of 18 to 30, I slept between 4 and 6 hours a night. But I had all of these annual physicals done, and to this moment, this was the first time I'd shown any signs of breaking. What went wrong? In finance, I or some other poor individual would spend days, nights, and even weekends, those weekends were really painful, looking at a company, looking at their financial metrics, and then comparing that company to other companies within the same business sector. We called that process benchmarking. My annual physicals were a benchmark for my health. But instead of looking at revenue and net income, we were looking at blood, urine, stool, and even imaging biomarkers versus reference ranges, as well as ecosystems. So what went wrong was I had the wrong biomarkers. When we were going through our biomarkers, one of the things that came up was thyroid stimulating hormone. It's a very common biomarker for assessing the health of the thyroid, TSH. Thyroid stimulating hormone, if you look at its reference range, depending on what lab you go to, may have significant influence from people that are much younger or much older than you. Was a 12-year-old's thyroid stimulating hormone level impacting what was average for me as someone who is 30? And was that relevant? And what is good about being average in a world where 39% of people over the age of 18 are overweight? My approach to all these measurements was so limited. I was looking at biomarkers in isolation. We were looking at cholesterol for heart function. We were looking at liver for liver function, or liver enzymes for liver function. And we were looking at testosterone for, among other things, sexual function. There was no discussion about the interrelationships of these biomarkers or the networks that they belong to. And what about ecosystems? An ecosystem is a biological set of organisms interacting in a physical environment. In Europe, we have something here called the SCORE risk chart. It's based on 250,000 different patients across 12 cohort studies. What they do is they look at systolic blood pressure, total cholesterol, gender, smoking status, among other biomarkers, and establish a 10-year likelihood of a fatal cardiac event. But was this relevant to me? If you're less than 40 years old, there's not enough data. And all of this focus on risk assessment was really missing the point. I wasn't doing annual physicals since the age of 18 for risk assessment. It wasn't aligned with my goals. What I was after was health optimization. To me, health optimization is a state of abundance and high levels of energy. It's a state of performing at your best both physically and mentally. But to arrive at a different goal, it often requires a different perspective. Let's go back to that idea of the ecosystem. Biological community of organisms interacting in a physical environment. If you think about it, you are your own ecosystem. You consist of organisms. That physical environment is you. This idea that you are your own ecosystem stems from the Endosymbiotic Theory, a theory of the evolutionary origin of our cells. It originated in Russia in the early 1900s and states that mitochondria, thought of as the battery or powerhouse of our cells, originated from a single-celled bacteria. Essentially what that means is those 37 plus trillion cells that exist in your body came about due to a symbiotic relationship between ancient bacteria and mitochondria. But those aren't the only organisms existing throughout our body. We have fungi all throughout us called the microbiome. We have viruses called the virome. And we have bacteria existing on our skin, gut, and mouth called the microbiome. And all of these bacteria and organisms take cues from our external environment, things like air pollution, light, and so many others, called the exposome. And all of these omes and organisms comes together and has a name, the holobiont. The holobiont is a term originally coined by Dr. Lynn Margulis and introduced to me by my mentor, Dr. Theodore Achacoso. And what's amazing about this is that up until a few years ago, our ability to assess the holobiont didn't exist. We weren't able to test for the presence of pathogenic bacteria in our gut. We weren't able to sequence our genes. But now, through blood, urine, stool, metabolomics, and other forms of testing, we're able to look at our toxic burden, assess the impact on our biochemistry, and really, with precision, recommend nutrients in order to fix, upgrade, and balance. Once you have all of this information, you can plot a to-do list for maintenance on yourselves. That to-do list can look a little bit like what foods are right for you, what to avoid, what supplements to take, what lifestyle modifications will lead to you living your best life. It helps us avoid distraction. Things like trying this, trying that, moving from one diet to another. Oh, wow, look, flashing light back there. That shiny object syndrome, right? Assessing the health of your holobiont is not looking at your health in terms of isolated biomarkers. It's looking at your health as the total health of your organisms. And once you have this information, you can track it over time to really track your progress. When I was in finance, quarterly earnings season was a busy time. Investors would get on conference calls with management where they'd hear the latest in strategy and financial metrics. They would ask questions, and based on those questions and answers, they would really be able to adjust their stock and bond positions around the world. We spend all of this time assessing the health of our investments, but what about the health of ourselves? It's time for the quarterly report of you. Assessing the holobiont with a degree of frequency is not perfect, but it's the best we have right now for health optimization. In the future, fields like systems biology and artificial intelligence will contribute to the degree of accuracy in our ability to measure. A decline in testing costs will allow this information to become more available to people around the world. This change in perspective may improve your life. This change in testing may upgrade your life. This change towards health optimization saved my life. I have higher levels of energy, better focus, more resilience, and yeah, I've begun to reverse some of those signs of aging as well. It all started with blood, urine, and stool testing done with a degree of frequency to get baseline, but also track my progress over time. And taking a proactive approach to your health is difficult. It requires dedication, habit change, and testing to a degree of frequency to establish that baseline and to also make sure you're on the right path. That path will take you to that next level. And that next level in health, that next level in performance, doesn't come from risk assessment. It comes from health optimization. And it starts with measuring your ecosystem. Thank you.